You are watching Stellar.
Hey everybody, Jim McCarthy with Stellar, and I am here today to talk to you and to talk to Garth Ross, who is our guest today, about success with online events in the performing arts and beyond, what that means, what what all is involved in it. And I just want to introduce him first. So he is this is going to be, we're going to talk about all this stuff. He is the inaugural executive director of the Yale Schwartzman Center. But before that, he was the vice president of community engagement, at the Kennedy Center. You may have heard of it, in Washington, D.C. He's produced over 7,000 performances in his career, of all kinds, including the ones on Kennedy Center's Millennium Stage, which started. We're going to have him tell us the whole story about this because it's fascinating. It was a daily free performance series and focuses on accessibility and used live streaming in that pursuit because obviously it makes a big difference, and that's a big. I think it's going to be a big piece of the puzzle for people going forward thinking about accessibility. But with no further ado, I would like to introduce you to Garth Ross. Garth, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Jim.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. So I think I just kind of want to get out of the way and let you tell the story a little bit about the beginnings of the Millennium Stage, and in particular, how and when and why you started using live streaming, to bring that to life. So tell us all about that.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned in the intro, the Millennium Stage is the Kennedy Center's daily free performance series, which is both on-site, 6 p.m. free performance every night of the year, as well as online. Streaming 6 p.m. every night of the year, and then a searchable archive of those performances. And this program is called Millennium Stage because it was actually started way back in 1997 with this idea that it was going to be a bridge to the new millennium. And as you will recall, we didn't even know if things were going to work in the new millennium. So we certainly didn't know that this series would chug along for over 20 years. But it was 1997, and our focus was on access, was increasing access and then expanding, broader representation of different art forms at the Kennedy Center as well. So we get this program up and running with a different artist of different discipline, up on stage every night of the year, 6 p.m. We really get our marketing and communications down. We build up our audience, and we get to the point quite quickly where we are sustaining at between 100 and 300 folks every night coming out to these shows. And this was a time when technology was changing a lot. Prosumer equipment was just sort of starting to get out there. Yeah. So rudimentary compared to what's available now. But in any case, this idea came about that it looks like the technology is there. This is what we were saying then, that we could actually stream these performances live over the web and make them fully accessible to everyone, not only folks who come here on site to the Kennedy Center, but anyone at a computer.
And what year was that?
That was 1999. So April 1st.
You were capable of doing that, but only just. That was still a stretch at the time. Possible, but difficult.
That's right. So it was almost exclusively dial-up. Any user was in a modem over dial-up. And I don't know if you remember this phenomenon, but when an image would come on screen, you would see the contours of it, and the pixels would be, almost as big as your fist at first.
Right.
And then the whole thing would jiggle, and the pixels would get smaller and smaller and smaller until you could see, hey, there's Jim McCarthy.
That's right.
Well, that works pretty well for something like this, or for just a photograph of Jim McCarthy.
Sure.
You've got a dance company on stage. It was not a great end user experience, let's say. Yeah. So at the very outset, I would call it, something that people were just interested to see that it was possible.
Right. This is 3 or 4 years before YouTube, and therefore before Flash video, which made that big jump possible from, first it was Flash that actually made it possible to do video a lot better on the web and deliver it in smaller and smaller chunks so that it was higher resolutions. This was early days, definitely.
It was very early days. If I'm not mistaken, my recollection is that Michael Dorf's Knitting Factory in New York was the only other venue regularly streaming in '99.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. That sounds right to me.
So
that's a strange pairing, I guess, the Kennedy Center and the Knitting Factory, but you know,
you
never know who's on the cutting edge of things, right? I mean, like it's not necessarily genre driven or anything like that. So
I hear what you're saying. You're so shocked that the Knitting Factory was on the cutting edge, keeping up with the Kennedy Center.
Exactly. You guys were setting the pace, and they were trying to keep up.
So, in any case, what was interesting and is so profoundly different than now is when it came to the idea of we want to improve this experience, which of course we did. That it ended up happening almost entirely through innovations in hardware and software. So, you know, the streaming bit rate was increasing. We were changing over our cameras as better cameras were becoming more available on the market. Switchers, we started to bring switchers in on it and have a multi-camera directed shoot. So year over year over year, we continued to improve the quality of the stream. We were improving the quality of the stream. And what I'm getting at is, or what I'm heading towards rather, is that doesn't necessarily mean you're creating an end user experience that has a tremendous amount of utility.
Yeah, yeah.
So while we were building viewership in the live experience, it wasn't massive. Naturally, when we had a higher profile artist, we'd get more streams. What we found is that the biggest reward for all of this investment was that the artists that we were featuring were coming away with a multi-camera directed shoot that we would burn onto a DVD for them at the end of every show. So that was another thing. We had a burner in the rack and give it to them every night. And because of this searchable archive, it became a massive promotional tool for artists who were able to send a link to a presenter. Now, that doesn't sound remarkable at this moment in time at all, but it was incredibly remarkable at the time. So we were working with artists who, might be I'm not even joking, like a company of indigenous artists from Colombia that we presented in collaboration with the Embassy of Colombia. And, they were coming away with this multi-camera shoot that they could send the link to another presenter or just to their mom.
Sure. I mean, it would have been rare to have a high quality video of a performance at that time. I mean, it's still not so common. And a lot of people still don't have something that they feel is really a great representation of it, as opposed to casual footage or a single camera or something like that. But then it would be a real asset.
And when it really dawned on us, Jim, was my colleague Diana and I, my other programmer colleague, we were at APAP one year. And for those who are listening who aren't familiar, the Association of Performing Arts Professionals, a great organization. We were on the trade, out on the floor. And so many of the booths of so many of the agencies were running videos from the Millennium Stage at APAP.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And that was just mind-blowing because Millennium Stage was by no means the biggest buyer at APAP.
Yeah.
But it was incredible to see our videos being used.
You guys were kind of seeding the world with content that other people, I mean, that's kind of the benefit for the artist, right? Is that they have this thing and they can use it to ply their trade. That at that time, oh my gosh, that must have been huge. But it must be also kind of very gratifying for you guys to walk around and go like, yeah, we made that happen. We made that one too, and that one too.
It was incredible. We didn't expect it, and plus we don't walk around the two of us didn't walk around the trade show together. So at one point we're debriefing and she was like, "Did you see a lot of?" Yeah. It isn't. We were both. Yeah. It was a big surprise, but that piece of feedback was incredibly valuable to us because we were learning what there really was need for, what there really was demand for in that particular lane of, being able to have a demo, a high quality demo from a high quality venue.
And at that time, I mean, the lack of broadband for most consumers is a serious limiter for video. And that probably didn't start changing till about 2005 or 6, I would think, that you started to see maybe close to a majority of internet users in the US have broadband. So that's, I mean, that's from the point of view of delivering video. I mean, it was darn near impossible. You used to have those really small windows in the Real Player, whatever
Real
player.
That's right.
Yeah.
For years we had Real Player. In fact, we were a little slow to move off of it because so much of our content was in Real.
Right. And then really, for those who ever watched video around the turn of the century, the term buffering was a very familiar term, right? It would always be buffering the next, bits of information that it could not deliver because the speed of your connection.
I can't believe I didn't use the term buffering yet. I mean, that was, yeah. The dominant experience of your screen watching it would be buffering and then a move to another still image, then buffering and a move to another still image.
Right.
It was
might get a couple seconds of actual motion, but that'd be about it.
I know.
So as the decade went on, how did the whole thing evolve? So obviously at first it's difficult just to deliver, and having a video asset was very valuable to the artists. Did there come a point, or when came a point, where the utility of the experience for somebody watching got to the point where it was actually good because of all the complementary hardware and software coming together?
Yeah. So that's a really important question, and I want to give a little bit of backstory here, and I can only speak to my experience at Kennedy Center. So but I do know from conversations with colleagues that similar things were happening elsewhere. In the 90s and into the early 2000s, IT departments, let me say it a different way, Jim. Our performing arts organizations and visual arts organizations weren't designed as media companies.
Yes.
So all of the technical expertise that wasn't theatrical production technical expertise, it all lived in the IT department. And that's great, but as a presenting and producing organization, programming comes out of the jazz department, the dance department, the theater, the theater department. Programming comes out of the programming departments within the organization. So there was a significant disconnect. The end user utility did continue to steadily improve, but only in a very narrow lane. The buffering eventually stopped, the streaming was smoother, the windows were bigger. We learned more about balancing live light and sound with streaming light and sound, because we used to only produce for the room, folks in the room, and then realized we had to split the difference on these lighting and sound issues. As I said, multi-camera, what you saw on your screen got better and better, and our views for the live and for the archive did continue to grow. But we weren't thinking of this content the way we would think of content if we were with a media organization.
Yes.
Because for a media organization, their stage is this and the screen. Well, in fact, it wasn't even this yet. It was just, it was on desktops, not even laptops at the time. But in any case, we weren't thinking of it as a stage, so we weren't thinking of it as programming. We were just pointing cameras at what we were doing on stage. So
almost more like an archive in a way than a production.
You're absolutely right.
That's one of the distinctions that I sometimes find useful. Is there's a way of thinking about filming something on a stage that is equivalent to just capturing it or recording it, so that you have I'm not sure exactly what the goal of that is, but that you have a record of it, as opposed to producing it as though it were a show, as though it were designed from the ground up to be a show. And that's the sort of evolution that I think people are going down today in this world as they do more hybrid events, and the online and digital component of this gets bigger and bigger. Is something that you went through seemingly a good number of years ago, but it's that whole thing of saying like, okay, if we were doing this from the word go,
Right.
as a show for people to watch, how would that change what we do? And then I see what you're saying. There's a kind of compromise between that, or compromise, or actually meeting everybody's needs, meeting the needs of both that and the in-person experience too.
Yeah, and we could frame it as hybridization as opposed to compromise, just to
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And to accomplish that, we didn't just need a different set of technical tools. We really needed a different shaped organization.
Yes.
And that's where there were just a lot of for me, there were a lot of lessons learned doing that for over 15 years. For geez Louise, yeah, for over 15 years I was overseeing this webcast, but I wasn't thinking about it as programming. I was thinking about the stage as programming. And to be honest, a lot of missed opportunities because as the media landscape grew and grew and grew, particularly once handheld was a primary target or stage for the media itself, the innovation in present, in how we present and how we script, and like short form media content. Like we were producing 1 hour shows. We weren't even tabbing them so that you could do just that song. And then meanwhile, in the media landscape, YouTube and post YouTube, there were all these innovations in what the content looks like and how handheld or desktop is leveraged to create a different experience for the viewer.
And the value of having all that content indexed and available and just out there in the world, it's just immense, right? The value to an organization, the value to the artist or anybody else. If there's one thing the last decade or so of media has taught us, it's that availability and proper tagging and all of that kind of stuff can drive things from being unknown to being huge, or at least finding even if it's not huge, finding an audience that it deserves. So It just feels like that is such a present challenge for people with this. I often think about, small arts or theater organizations that deserve a bigger audience because the one they have is inherently local. And the key to it is not somehow getting people to travel, to their city or whatever necessarily. It's, the leverage of digital is immense. But I just want to see people get full benefit from that.
Absolutely. And, it's not even, you said it's not about having people travel to their town, their theater.
Yeah.
It's also not even just about having people travel to their website. We've gotten I'm talking about the world, not the performing arts sector, but media makers have gotten so sophisticated with metadata and search optimization that even if they have a wonderful web platform, their content is showing up all over the place.
Yes.
And when we're talking about this archive that we had, you were finding that initially only on the Kennedy Center's website, and then eventually we were posting everything also to YouTube, and then we were starting to get more robust with our metadata, so it would, surface more frequently.
Yeah.
It got to the point where if you searched a certain artist, if they had performed on Millennium Stage, it would be one of the first things that came up, just because we eventually, as I said, we're pretty robust and assertive with
But this is your point about the skills that you needed to add to the organization, right? You needed to get competencies in the area of the metadata and just managing all that stuff, I assume.
That's right. And our colleagues in IT actually were among the right colleagues within the organization. So that piece, I hope you're hearing in this that while we didn't do everything right, there were things we did really, really well. The big blind spot is that we weren't, in my view, looking at our digital output as programming on, if you think of the Kennedy Center as a place with 9 theaters, 9 stages, I started using the term internally, programming for the 10th stage. How are we thinking about programming for the 10th stage?
Yeah. And you know, it's the 10th stage is interesting because the 10th stage has a whole different set of characteristics than the other 9 in your world, which is that it can be anywhere at any, I mean, it just has a whole different,
that's right,
pluses and minuses. So I assume that as time went on, you just got more competent. Did the audiences grow for the digital content as you went?
They did. They did. You know, there were a couple massive drivers, and this will be no surprise in an age of virality, which we didn't, you know, we also didn't know that term at that point either. Yeah. But there was a period in time where we collaborated with YouTube to produce a massively high-tech free Millennium Stage performance in the Kennedy Center Opera House that was completely a co-pro with YouTube. And curatorially, our focus was programming on the live stage at the Kennedy Center Opera House, artists who had grown their career on the YouTube platform, not through the channels that we all grew up with, meaning, you know, the touring circuit, the record industry, you know, performing arts centers, so on and so forth. These were artists who came up on the YouTube platform and just grew through the YouTube platform. And that show included one artist who did not fit that mold, but who also was a very big presence on YouTube, and it was John Legend. And the reason we worked with John, with whom we'd worked before, and he's wonderful to work with, but artistically and curatorially, was because this phenomenon, Lindsey Sterling, the violinist and dancer, who, you know, grew her career on YouTube, the radio edit and the video for his hit "All of Me" had Lindsey Sterling on it. So just John at the piano and then Lindsey Sterling in the solo piece. So that was sort of he was the headliner of that show. Yeah. Now, interestingly, on YouTube, even at that time, every single other artist on the show, every single one, had a way bigger following on YouTube than John Legend. But John Legend on radio, on television, on every other market was way bigger than these folks on YouTube. But why that was watershed for us is because the archive post of that show drove an absurd amount of traffic, and it may still be the piece of content with the most views on the Kennedy Center's website. And what soon matched it was taking the Kennedy Center Honors telecast and excerpting key moments and posting them to our website and to YouTube. And between excerpts from Honors and this particular YouTube show we produced, that started to really carry Kennedy Center media content out across the web in a way it wasn't happening when people had to come to our site. Like musicians and agents were, or fans of those particular artists were. But generally speaking, that really flipped the paradigm with those two things.
That's pretty great. So, I think part of the goal of this discussion is to help people think about, and we're talking, I think, more to performing arts people today, in particular, because we have you as a guest. But it's a lot of 20 years of experience, basically, of not only producing shows that are meant to give access to the community that is in person, but also to expand that, and all the twists and turns in the road that you went down of actually making that possible. If you were to try to give people in the, let's say, theater and performing arts sector in general, a handful of nuggets of advice about leveraging digital platforms, especially just given where we are now, given the behavior shifts that the pandemic has created, what would they be? Like, where would you, if someone was just saying, like, I'm generally a believer in the value of online events or digital live entertainment, or just leveraging these kinds of tools, but maybe I only have the vaguest idea of where to start. What would you say to them are the things to think about first? Okay, I think the clearest way to express this is to answer within the frame of, let's pretend I was giving someone
this advice that you just asked for. Let's pretend, Jim, that you are starting a brand new venue. You're going to build a brand new venue and a brand new organization from the ground up. You're not an existing organization. Things that I would say include: do not build all proscenium theaters with fixed seats. Like, remember that a proscenium theater, a proscenium stage in a theater with fixed seats, that is a technology in and of itself for interface between particular types of art and the consumer, the viewer.
It's a very committed choice in a way.
It is a massively committed choice, and it's so committed, the whole world is committed to it, and we've been committed to it for hundreds, if not thousands of years, so much so that as artists have become more and more experimental and more interdisciplinary, they've actually had to recast their own work to get booked. How does that help us as the arts? You know, what we really want to do is be led by the artists. If they are becoming more interdisciplinary, we want to follow them where they go. But if we're going to present that work in a proscenium theater with fixed seats, then they have to recast it. So I'm not speaking against proscenium theaters with fixed seats. I'm just saying, let's say you're creating this new multi-venue,
multi-stage venue.
Multi-stage venue, thank you.
Multi-outlet sort of venue, yeah.
So that's thing one. Now the counterbalance venue, I would suggest that it's a flat floored space, whether large or small. Then I would suggest that you consider both of those theaters to be a hybrid live performance venue and digital media studio. So think, if you will, I mean, I often, in my mind, I think about the early days of television, jumping forward to Saturday Night Live. And I use Saturday Night Live as an example because they actually, the way they shoot it, they let you see that it's a people on it. But, you know, early days of television, it was basically a vaudeville show with cameras pointing at it. But it was just the show, was the same old show. And now the studio for SNL is a completely hybrid space, which is as much about everything that happens on stage and with the cameras and the lights as it is about the audience being in the space. Okay. Then I would say, I would encourage.
Well, I guess so. Part of the point there is that you don't have to hide the fact that it's happening in a space. You know, from the point of view of the online viewer, let's say, or the digital component of it, you don't have to hide the fact that it's happening in a space where people are sitting and watching and that kind of thing. In fact, you sort of leverage it.
Oh my God, I love that you pointed out that detail, because honest to God, the emotions that are tied up in aesthetics and traditions, as they relate to canon or just personal taste, are intense. And as I produced more for the camera in other theaters, particularly the Kennedy Center Concert Hall, we wanted different types of shots. So I started working with directors who were putting booms in the wings that we could, roll forward and out, really smoothly. This was earlier days when we were still using the same really, really huge cameras. And I was getting a tremendous amount of pushback from a variety of different areas saying, no, you can't do that because you can see that. The audience can see that. And my response was, well, of course they can see that. I mean,
they know it's not magic. they know there's process behind it.
They can also see they're in a room with lights hanging up in the air. I mean, it's just folks weren't used to it. And then from there, as cameras got smaller and smaller, my gosh, cameras on mic stands and on music stands and cameras, hung in the grid in addition to a boom. And then booms started to more or less go away. And it was just a bunch of small cameras creating a whole bunch of different shots, and then maybe one or two people on Steadicam. And a great long shot from the back with a really great lens. It was just amazing. So anyhow, that's a really great point, that you're going to see the process, and that's fine. The audience is fine with that. And if you were to try to mask that for the purposes of your live audience, you'd be ruining it. You'd be ruining your chance of creating the experience you want for your digital audience.
Yeah, and I think there are two modalities that people are used to, and I think there's a third one that needs to be explored. The one modality is you're in a room and you're watching a show that's happening in front of you. The other is you're watching a television program that's been edited to the point where you don't see any edges, right?
Yep.
But to the way that I talk about it is that digital live entertainment actually is aware of the fact that it's occurring and that it's occurring live, and possibly that it's occurring. I think this is going to be increasingly true in front of an audience that's watching it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that represents a sort of third form that is going to have its own, rules about what works and its own rules about what's good, and that kind of thing. And I think when, you actually, I like your example of Saturday Night Live. No one ever thinks to themselves, if they're watching Saturday Night Live, what amateurs, I just saw a cameraman and some of the audience members. Like, that's not, that's not it's like, no, that's the aesthetic. That's the vibe. Like
what amateurs? I just saw Lorne Michael walk onto the set.
Right. Like, they call it Saturday Night Live for a reason, right? It's right. In its own way, it's digital live entertainment too, right? It's just happened to have been broadcast on television for most of it.
That's right. I'm sure there are better examples than SNL. It's just a widely understood one. So then the other thing that I would say, which is equally important, and I alluded to this earlier, is to really be mindful about how you design your org chart. Okay? So just like an organization would have a production department and a programming department, it's not like any program happens without production or vice versa, but it's different groups of folks with different competencies. It is probably going to be necessary to have folks in the production department that have particular expertise in digital media production, including hardware and software that relate to editing and distribution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's in the production department. Then in the programming department, there needs to be at least one, if not a department, of digital media producers. Like, if you've ever walked into an ad firm, how many of the offices or the Carols are digital media producers who are just making cool content on a workstation? Yeah. They're conceptualizing things. They're not just technicians, they're right. Filmmakers, essentially.
Yeah. Well, it's skills to work in a medium that's a little different from just the straight live medium.
That's right. And then the last piece of it is post-production and distribution. So, basically I was saying, like, you need in your production department, you need folks who can support from a technical perspective this hybridized live environment. And then I'm saying in the programming department, you need folks who conceptualize these hybridized live and digital experiences. Mm-hmm. Well, then you also need literally a post-production team that also, in hand in glove with your marketing and communications folks, develops distribution strategies. Because in the live event world, you promote on the front end. Mm-hmm. In the digital content world, you promote on the back end. Or both. I think in many, depending on how. Yeah, I mean, you have content that's live and then has a life beyond that, and then you have some content that never appears till it's already sort of recorded and in the can. I think both models, but you're right. In both cases, they're different, right? In right. Both cases, they show up differently than promoting an in-person show. Yeah. So, like, who's going to have the time to promote and exploit content that's in the can, great content that's in the can, when you've got budgeted sales targets for the next 5 shows in your season? Your team's going to be focused on that, because that's the way we built our organizations traditionally. So I'm just saying that you need to build an organization that from a facility standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, and from a technical capability standpoint is truly hybridized. It's a live event, arts venue, and it's a media company. And let's talk about why that's important, because I completely agree with you. And by the way, we'll do a little sidebar and say, if you're in an organization that's somewhat smaller in terms of resources than the one that I think we're talking about right now, this applies
just as well. It just all gets slimmed down, right? All the numbers in terms of the resources all just get slimmed down. The expertise remains the same.
You're totally right, and resources is just the right word. It's at any scale, it's just resource distribution. So you got to make sure that in your marketing and communications plan, where you never would have put any resource, even if it was just time with your one person to do promotion of a thing after the fact. Now you got to do that, or you're not going to leverage the value of that content.
And I also think that the kind of solo creator of the future, or even the present, forget the future, the solo creator of the future, the very, very small organizations that do great work, the person who's kind of typically at the center of the creative drive of that is going to have a lot of skills in both the in-person and the digital side of things. I don't think there's any question that's happened, but I think if anything, it's going to continue to create a certain amount of pressure and interest. Maybe interest is a more positive way of putting it, on the part of people who are in the live entertainment world to absorb those skills. It's going to get to the point where they don't see it so much as turning from one thing to the other that's more integrated. I don't think there's any question that that's what's happening. Well, I mean,
no argument. I mean, it's not about getting good at doing this and then doing that.
Yeah.
It's getting good at doing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Also, I just want to the converse of what I was saying about, you just made the point about scale, that it's just about how you plan to use your resources to get the most out of this hybridized experience, even if you were just a one-person shop. It's true. I also just want to point out that if you are massive in scale, you still have to, like I was imagining that, like, I'm advising someone who's starting an organization from scratch. But if you're a massive organization with a massive budget and people have been working in these departments, their offices are in certain places, they do certain things for a long time, it's a big challenge. Scale can get in your way more.
There's a certain amount of inertia that comes along with that, right? Like the inertia of being big in that way and having all those resources presents its own set of challenges.
That's right, because you can't, no organization, certainly in the not-for-profit sector, has the ability to move in this direction only through additive means. It's going to have to move in this direction through reorganization.
That makes a lot of sense. And this whole thing makes me think of why this is important. I think for some people, they may be asking the question, well, why do I have to deal with this at all if I choose not to? And I like to frame this in terms of scale, but in a different way. And that is that, my very clear belief is that those of us who work, and especially those who've worked for a long time in the live entertainment and arts world, we tend to think in hundreds and thousands, right? Like these are the numbers that we encounter on a regular basis, right? Hundreds or thousands or maybe tens of thousands, big concert or baseball or something like that. But most of the rest of the media and entertainment landscape thinks in millions.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something. I mean, I love the fact that if I'm sitting in the Pasadena Playhouse, there's 658 other people with me, or whatever the number is, and that's intimate, and you can literally look around and see the faces of the people, and that's a very important part of what makes live entertainment great. But if I'm talking to the whole industry of which I'm a part, and the motivation behind building Stellar and all the rest of this, it's because I think this work that people do is good enough that it deserves an audience in millions. And I think it's that part of it is, what we do is driven by the numbers in our heads. You know what I mean?
True.
And there's hundreds and thousands. What happens if you start imagining millions? Even if you don't go to millions, right away, if you realize that all of a sudden you have the opportunity to do that, I think it changes maybe how people conceptualize themselves in these jobs and in these organizations and as artists.
Yeah, the mindset and the approach that you just described is absolutely a huge driver. But I can share an argument that I believe is far more urgent, which is that the economics of live performance in the long run is a losing battle when it comes to our venues. And let me say what I mean. It took as many bodies on stage and behind the stage to put on Così fan tutti when it first came out.
Right.
And now every year, the cost of producing Così fan tutti has gone up and gone up and gone up. And we can only strip down the orchestra so much. We can only strip down the characters on stage and the stagehands behind. So to make the economics work, there really are only two levers we can pull over and over again. One is ticket price and the other is fundraising.
Yep.
At a certain point, you start to top out because there are only so many days in the year, that's fixed, and there are only so many seats in your house, that's fixed.
Yep.
So this hybridization of our arts organizations that allows us to build a live experience that is as great as it's ever been, and also to simultaneously produce a highly differentiated product that doesn't have that cap of 365 days a year and 250 seats or 2,000 seats, whatever the venue is that's what changes everything.
That's right. And in some way I was trying to drive at the same point, which is I've often referred to live entertainment and arts as being the business model of the damned, right?
Yes. There you go.
The incredibly high fixed costs, and Così fan tutti obviously is an extreme example of high fixed costs when it comes to a show. But no matter what, right, you get to that sort of, let's say 65% sold, where you maybe tip over into now we're making a little money, and just when it's getting good, the wall comes down, you hit capacity and you're done, right? So you start over the next day, back at risk, back in the bad place of not making money. And for me, it's also, do I believe, and I think this is kind of a gut check for people in the business, do I believe that Così fan tutti or whatever show deserves a bigger audience? And for me, the answer is hell yes. Hell yes, it does. And those two things go hand in hand,
Well, I mean, there's just no question. I mean, I don't even like using the term the nonprofit sector because we don't wake up in the morning to not make a profit. I like using the mission sector because we all get up and do this work because we're so passionate about it. So yeah, I want to serve that mission by making that experience available to as many people as possible. And I'm going to repeat one thing that I said and then add another thing. But getting skilled, building our muscles at differentiating the live experience from the digital experience is one of the huge things we have to get our head around, because we were talking at length about Millennium Stage and pointing the cameras at it. That was the same as the Ed Sullivan Show. 20 cameras. It was a new technology, 20 cameras at a live event. Well, over time, it has been learned how to differentiate those experiences so greatly that there are experiences that are not hybridized at all. They're just purely digital, and then there are really high quality hybridized experiences. But even with those high quality hybridized experiences, the difference between the way you experience and the way you feel in the live event, we have to maintain a premium on that, not because we owe it to anyone, except that it is a unique experience when you gasp or cry next to a person who you've never met before in a darkened theater. I mean, the sense of community, the sense of art as campfire gathering us together. I mean, this is a really, really, really important thing to us. And then there's this other experience of being able to be on my own, at my own, being one of millions who've seen Citizen Kane over and over and over again.
Yeah, there's that. And then I would add that one of the opportunities and one of the things that's been most exciting about the last year for me when it comes to what we've done on Stellar is that even though it's different, there are ways in which digital live entertainment brings people together too.
Absolutely.
It's really remarkable, when we see people, join a chat or go log on to a show an hour before it starts and spend the next hour talking to each other and spend a half hour after the show ends talking to each other and interacting during the show in a way that is totally different from, but also doesn't happen in person. Right. So you wouldn't sit there and chat with really, generally speaking, people don't get together for an hour and talk before, the Broadway show starts, right? They just you don't really have that same kind of robust. So I think that the possibilities there don't by any means replace, like you said, actual physical gathering, but they do add something that those physical gatherings don't have too, and it can be the beginning, I think, of a lot more of that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's one other piece which can happen with the live also, but I feel like there are more opportunities with the digital, because the digital is a what's the word I'm looking for? It's an artifact that remains. Is this idea of cross-collateralization?
Yep.
That there are so many different ways you can slice and dice and repackage and create different products out of that.
Yes.
Out of that piece of content.
No doubt.
In fact, you're probably not going to want to do. Your users aren't going to want. What they want is not just to see the live stream. Some do. I mean, when I say cross-collateralized, live stream is a piece of that. But then there's so many other opportunities. Mm-hmm. And my gosh, what it would take to get good at that is why I'm saying that our organizations in the live arts are going to need to also be media organizations where that part of the organization grows in its expertise, just like you would want your production and programming and marketing folks to be growing in their expertise.
Absolutely. We only have a few minutes left, and we really need to talk about what you're doing now, because it's big and it's exciting. So tell us about the Schwartzman Center, how that happened, and what we have to look forward to there.
Thanks so much for that. So the Schwartzman Center is here at Yale University. It is the result of just an extraordinary leadership gift by Steve Schwartzman. And what it has made possible is the reimagining and renovation of an incredible complex of buildings called the Yale Commons and Memorial Hall. Together, those two renovated spaces with other added spaces that were added underground and to the exterior have more than doubled the program space of a facility that historically had been principally a dining hall, and now it is a university-wide Center for the Arts and student union with also tremendous dining opportunities in it as well. And it essentially offers it offers a robust version of all the things that we want and need when we are in arts and cultural spaces. We want to go there and see the art. We want to go there and see and interact with other people. We want to go there, and we also want to gather around a meal, whether it's a quick snack or to eat in the theater's bar or restaurant. So so this is Yale's first ever university-wide student union and arts center. And we are in the process of building the organization that I was describing. We're designing our, I joke sometimes that we are an arts center with no theaters, because we don't have a full-size proscenium theater with fixed seats. The Yale Commons, which has tremendous technical infrastructure now for the production of performances and events that it didn't used to have, holds thousands of people standing. It's a massive building. Think Hogwarts Hall in Harry Potter. There's a dome on this building that's fully renovated inside. It's like a black box theater, except that it's white and it's round. And it's very laden with technological infrastructure, sprung floor, but also tremendous amount of capability for sound, lighting, and projection. And then we have a more traditional venue, which is think kind of a cabaret space. It's dining and a stage at the end, and it can be reconfigured in a number of ways. But it's bringing a lot of different styles of venues together. We are building in infrastructure to create these hybridized spaces, meaning hybridized between live performance space and digital media studio. And then we're also building the organization to have not only strong AV capture capability and streaming, but we are also building a digital media training program so that we build a pipeline of young digital media makers who can work with us on the post-production and distribution of the content. So we're trying to do the things that we've been talking about, and that's why they're top of mind for me.
So, and I know the pandemic sort of put a little bit of a gap in the calendar of getting open, but what's the status? Is the center open now, or is it still to come? Tell us what can we do? How can we participate in this?
So at the moment, first and foremost, you can visit us online at schwarzman.yale.edu. The center is going to begin to open up in September. Health safety protocols are constantly changing, so we're not going to be able to open to the general public for a bit, perhaps for a couple of months from there. But at this exact moment, we are actually, as you suggested, the construction project had been delayed by COVID. So we're just in the final finishing stages, punch list, if you will. So after years of construction, we're close to being able to bring this place to life. So this coming fall semester will be the first time students will be able to come in the center and start to experience this for themselves. And then soon after, the public will be able to as well.
That sounds exciting. It sounds like a great project to be able to sink your teeth into after all the experience of the last 20 years or more, I'm sure, with this. And I was excited to hear about it. I spent some time on the website this morning just checking out all the different. It's very collaborative in its approach. It seems like everything is designed around the idea of collaboration and giving people space that they can use in a way that they want to engage with it, which is fantastic.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for noticing that. I'll just call out 3 parts of the website so we also designed our website so that it supported the kind of activity that we are trying to support in the live building. Like I was suggesting earlier, that you need to build a different organization to get a different outcome. So what you might typically think of as sort of the media library or the media section of a website, we call replay. So that's the part of the website where we post and offer finished content. Mm-hmm. Then we have a whole platform in the website for makers, for collaboration, for digital storytelling, digital art making, digital media making, collaboration. We call that storyboard. So the finished content goes one place, the makers go another place, and then all of art making, all of this starts with ideas. And, many of the best ideas come from unexpected places, unexpected connections. And so we have a part of the website called Sessions that supports a physical series of sessions, they're really quite simple. A session is just a group of people getting together around an idea getting together around a table with food and art and ideas. And what we are offering is a format, essentially, Jim, where when an idea is proposed, we work with the proposer to essentially curate the participants so that we're bringing in undergraduates, graduate professional students, faculty, folks from the New Haven community, as well as artists and thought leaders. And it's a small, intimate gathering. And we think of sessions as the kind of the generative unit of the kind of art and experience that we hope is produced out of the Schwartzman Center going forward. So in a way, it's kind of soup to nuts that we're supporting, creating the conditions for new relationships and new ideas to form, and then spaces for live events, and then to also translate them into the digital space. That's great. Well, Garth, thank you for your time today. This has been a great conversation. I hope that everybody else has enjoyed it, but I certainly did. So thank you. Great to talk to you. Thank you. Great to talk to you. Sorry. Thanks again, Garth. This has been great. There's so much to learn here, and we just want to thank you for tuning in. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another conversation about how to succeed with online events. Thanks, everybody. I'm Jim McCarthy. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.